Hope in a time of crisis. We have reached what may very well be another turning point in our society. So much is coming at us seemingly all at once. A global viral pandemic, with its resulting economic devastation, stresses on our healthcare system, and vigorous debates about the proper scientific and social response. Numerous and unprecedented protests over racist violence, with vocal demands for dramatic policing reforms and change across the nation. Developing awareness of and calls for change regarding workplace sexual assault and sexual discrimination. Ongoing environmental degradation and increasing climate change, soon reaching irreversible points of transition. The rise of illiberal and authoritarian governments in states that had reliably been democratic that threatens our long-standing security and cooperation alliances. And an international crisis over refugees and immigrants driven by violent civil wars, globalized economic transformations, and sea level and rainfall changes. The early 21st century is far from the peaceful and prosperous future we imagined after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 and 1991. All of these separate crises are long in coming, revealing trends and issues to the general public that experts and scholars in each of these areas have long foreseen. We are torn on the one hand between a social inertia that just wants to put a Band-Aid on the problem, the temptation to get by with superficial symbolic changes, and on the other hand, a genuine desire to get to the root of our common and interconnected problems and significantly shift social structures and budgetary allocations in order to address these issues more justly. We are not ignorant or uninformed about any or all of these crises, nor are we without many different solutions, however difficult they may be to implement. Moreover, they are all interconnected, for we as human beings are connected to each other and to the political, economic, and natural worlds in which we live. We may face multiple problems on multiple fronts, but we have faced such trials before, and solving them now, however imperfectly, will not stop some form of them recurring again. But we are in a better situation than ever to confront them in an interconnected and transformative manner. Progress in any one will support progress in any other area, as people are motivated and empowered to change the circumstances in which we live our lives. Social organizations and business corporations are making one or more of these areas of crises part of their mission to address, incorporating into their plans and messaging effective responses to popular demands for change and reform. For-profit businesses are increasingly partnering with nonprofit charities and reform organizations to meet their mutual needs. They and we can rely on the knowledge that we have faced much worse in the past. Remember the fear of nuclear annihilation, the ravages of polio, measles, and smallpox, the even more violent and widespread protests in the 1960s that came with civil rights reform and the end of Jim Crow, not to mention 2 world wars, economic depression, Holocaust, and genocide. And we still managed to eke out some progress and change, however imperfect and at times even frustrated it may have been. The transformative resilience, innovative creativity, and inherent goodness of the majority of humanity, I believe, will prevail in these times of crises. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, is a quote often attributed to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But King in the 1960s was in turn paraphrasing the Reverend Thomas Parker, a 19th century Boston pastor, abolitionist, and reformer. The full quote: "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." This was given by a man who for a lifetime fought for the end of slavery, the equality of women, prison and police reform, improvements in education and healthcare, and international peace. He saw then, as we more clearly do now, and acted consistently about, as we are called to do even now, how all of our crises of injustice and inequality are interconnected. He knew, as Dr. King and many others afterwards have known, that we often have to focus on the immediate challenge in front of us, whether it be the slavery of Parker's day, the civil rights of King's time, or the problem of excessive police violence against African Americans in our own day, without losing sight of all the other problems to which they relate. They all require our individual, social, and business efforts if the arc of the universe is to bend towards justice and not in the other direction. And because we as human beings also need to not just resolve one issue, but all of these things: peace, education, health, freedom, equality, and justice. We need all these things, but we need them in different ways and for different reasons, based on our different situations in life. Each of us contains multitudes, as Walt Whitman wrote, filled with the diversity of our ethnic and familial heritages, our social and economic positions, our genders and sexualities, our ages and health statuses, our geographical and local situations. The multiple crises of our time that affect us in different ways, depending on our nearness to any one of these particular issues and our own position in life. This multiplicity of diversities is not weakness, but strength. They mean that there are so many different opportunities for social organizations and business corporations to find and dedicate their efforts towards, knowing that emphasizing one area of reform and cooperation will assist in reaching a solution for all the crises we face. Co-sponsored activities and projects, organizational and marketing partnerships, fundraising and project funding through joint foundations, grant programs and implementation, as long as they are not greenwashing fig leaves, are all avenues for nonprofit and for-profit collaboration that can have significant impacts on our myriad social crises. These types of collaborative projects and programs are some of the components, and very effective ones as well, to addressing our multiple crises in these days. They are also one of the many ways we can be hopeful about the future, so that so many good people are willing to put in the time and energy, the labor and the capital to make a better life for our fellow human beings across the world. In times when I feel down or despondent, angry or exhausted by the confluences of crises we face, I remind myself of the long history of successful efforts at reform and renewal humanity has already undertaken, the vast resources of energy and ideas we have used to solve our problems, no matter our differences, and that with our joint efforts, the long arc of the moral universe will bend towards justice. Because we know that when we put our minds and our backs to it, we can make constructive and collaborative decisions that are both good for society and good for business.